There was a time when a woman could open the cabinet under her sink and not face a wall of sprays, gels, foams, powders, and plastic bottles, all promising to handle one tiny problem each. In many 1950s homes, cleaning was built around a smaller set of basics, and one of the quiet workhorses in that lineup was a simple brown bottle of hydrogen peroxide. It was cheap, easy to find, and useful in more than one room. That mattered in an era when women were expected to keep bathrooms bright, keep their laundry looking fresh and white, and keep their kitchens under complete control, without wasting money on a different product for every task. The point was not that peroxide was some miracle liquid. The point was that earlier housewives often knew how to get more out of ordinary things, and that one habit alone kept a lot of homes feeling cleaner than ours do now. If old household wisdom like this still matters to you, subscribe and stay close. There is a lot of practical knowledge from these earlier homes that still makes sense, even now. Number 1. Whitening bathroom sink stains. One of the first places peroxide earned its keep was the bathroom sink. White porcelain showed everything. It was the standard of cleanliness. Toothpaste streaks, soap film, water spots, and little rusty or yellow marks could make a whole bathroom feel tired, even when the room itself was not truly dirty. A housewife in the 1950s understood something modern cleaning culture often forgets. If the sink looked fresh, the room felt fresh. Peroxide helped with that by giving stubborn pale stains a lift, without making the job feel like a full Saturday scrubbing session. That was important in homes where the bathroom was small, shared, and used constantly. Instead of waiting until stains became part of the surface, women often handled them early. That habit of catching small marks before they settled in made the whole house easier to manage. Number 2. Brightening dingy washcloths and towels. Then there were the washcloths and hand towels, which took a beating in busy homes. In many families, these were not decorative extras. They were used over and over, washed often, and expected to stay presentable. White or pale towels especially could go dull fast. Peroxide became one of those quiet helpers women reached for when cloth started looking tired rather than ruined. It helped bring back some brightness and made everyday linens feel cared for again. That may sound like a small thing, but in the 1950s, clean-looking fabric mattered. A dingy towel suggested the whole house was slipping, while a bright one suggested someone was paying attention. Do you remember older homes where even the hand towels seemed crisp and ready, no matter how busy the house was? That feeling did not happen by accident. Number 3. Freshening sponges and dish rags. Peroxide also had a place in dealing with one of the least glamorous parts of housework: the smell that settles into dish rags, cleaning cloths, and sponges. These little items were used hard in kitchens that ran all day, and they could turn sour quickly. A modern home often throws things out faster and buys replacements without much thought, but many 1950s housewives were trained to stretch what they had. That meant reusable cloths had to be cleaned, freshened, and put back into service instead of tossed aside. Peroxide was useful because it helped deal with that stale, used smell that can make even a clean kitchen feel unpleasant. Once the dish rag smells bad, the whole room seems less clean, even if the counters are wiped down. Women knew that, so they treated the cloth, not just the countertop. Number 4. Treating small fabric stains before they set. Another genius use was simple stain treatment. Not every mark on fabric called for a full drama, but small stains had a way of turning permanent if ignored. That was especially true in a time when women often had fewer everyday clothes, fewer linens, and more reason to preserve what they owned. A spot on a blouse, apron, towel, or child's clothing needed attention before it had time to settle in and become one more sign of wear. Peroxide fit neatly into that rhythm because it could be used as part of a quick early response. That is really the deeper lesson here. These women were not waiting for the house to become a disaster. They were interrupting mess while it was still small. Modern life often turns every cleaning problem into a project. Older homes more often handled trouble at the moment it appeared, and that kept bigger work from piling up. Number 5. cleaning toothbrush cups and small bathroom items. The same thinking showed up in all the little bathroom items people tend to overlook now. Toothbrush cups, soap dishes, little trays, and other small pieces collected residue fast. Left alone, they made even a clean counter look neglected. In a 1950s home, these details mattered because guests noticed them and family members lived with them every single day. Peroxide helped housewives freshen these small objects without needing some special product only meant for one material or one corner of the room. That is one of the biggest differences between then and now. We live in a time of specialty cleaners. They often lived in a time of practical overlap, where one bottle had to prove its value again and again. And once peroxide had shown what it could do with towels, sink stains, cloths, and little bathroom items, it was only natural that women started carrying that same bottle into the kitchen, where spills, odors, and daily grime never stayed in one place for long. If peroxide proved its value in the bathroom and laundry basket, the kitchen is where it really became part of the daily rhythm. This was the busiest room in the house, and in many 1950s homes it did more than cooking alone. It handled breakfasts before school, midday cleanup, supper prep, dishwashing, leftovers, grocery sorting, and all the little messes that came with family life. A woman did not need the kitchen to look perfect every minute, but she did need it to stay under control. That is why hydrogen peroxide fits so naturally into the old cleaning mindset. It was not only used to make things look better, it was used to stop odors, stains, and grime before they spread into the rest of the room. The goal was always the same: do a little now so you do not have to do much later. Number 6. Wiping cutting boards and food prep surfaces. Food preparation left behind more than crumbs. Cutting boards and work surfaces picked up juices, odors, and stains that could linger if ignored. In a smaller 1950s kitchen, that mattered because one messy surface changed the feeling of the whole room. There was less space to hide disorder. A housewife often treated the counter as a workspace, not a storage shelf, so keeping it fresh mattered both practically and visually. Peroxide became one of those quiet helpers used to wipe down problem spots and deal with the traces food left behind. This was especially useful when the same areas were used again and again through the day. Instead of letting one meal blend into the next, women often reset the surface before moving on. That kept the kitchen from feeling like it was always halfway through yesterday's work. Number 7. Helping remove coffee and tea marks from cups. Older kitchens were full of cups, saucers, and everyday dishes that stayed in rotation for years. Coffee and tea left rings and shadows that could make clean cups look old before their time. Peroxide had a place here too, especially when housewives wanted to lift those marks and keep plain household dishes looking brighter. That mattered more than it may sound. In many homes, there was no endless cycle of replacing slightly stained things. Women were expected to care for what they had and keep it respectable. A cup that looked brown inside, even after washing, suggested neglect. A cup that looked clean suggested order. The same mindset applied to all sorts of kitchenware. People often say earlier generations were better at managing homes. But a lot of that came down to this simple habit of noticing small signs of wear and dealing with them before they became permanent. Number 8. Lifting stains from white aprons or dish towels. Aprons and dish towels lived hard lives in 1950s kitchens. They caught grease, splashes, flour, coffee, sauces, and whatever else the day threw at them. White cloth especially showed every mistake. Peroxide became useful because it gave women one more way to deal with visible kitchen stains without treating each one like a separate emergency. That fit the whole spirit of the era. The kitchen was not managed with panic. It was managed with rhythm. A stained towel could be dealt with. A marked apron could be worked on. The point was to keep household fabrics in service and looking decent for as long as possible. That thrift mattered because replacing things casually was not always an option. It also mattered because a clean apron or fresh towel helped maintain the feeling that the kitchen, however busy, was still in good hands. Number 9. Freshening ice boxes or refrigerators. The refrigerator, or in earlier homes the icebox, was another place where peroxide quietly proved its worth. Cold storage had smells of its own, and spills or forgotten drips could linger longer than people expected. In a time before modern odor absorbers, scented liners, and rows of specialty cleaning sprays, women often relied on straightforward solutions and regular upkeep. Peroxide helped with the kind of stale, slightly sour feeling that could settle into shelves, containers, and corners. This mattered because the refrigerator was one of the clearest signs of how a kitchen was being run. A crowded, sticky, smelly box made the whole home feel less orderly. A clean one made meal planning easier and waste less likely. When people talk about older kitchens being simpler, this is part of what they mean. There were fewer products, yes, but also fewer delays. Problems were handled when they were still small. Number 10. Cleaning stained containers and jars. Glass jars, reusable containers, and food storage dishes were not disposable background items. They were part of daily life. Housewives reused things constantly, and that meant stains and cloudiness had to be dealt with if those pieces were going to stay useful. Peroxide could help with the marks left behind by sauces, preserves, or repeated use, giving ordinary containers a cleaner look and feel. That may sound minor, but older homes were held together by small acts of maintenance like this. The women running them often understood that clutter and grime do not arrive all at once. They build layer by layer, dish by dish, stain by stain, so they interrupted that process early. Which of these kitchen habits feels closest to something you saw growing up? Because once peroxide earned a permanent place among the cups, counters, aprons, and refrigerator shelves, it naturally followed the laundry and linen basket too, where wear showed up even faster and every white fabric told its own story. If the kitchen showed how well a home was being managed, the laundry revealed how hard that management really was. White fabrics were everywhere in 1950s life. Socks, undershirts, handkerchiefs, pillowcases, baby clothes, towels, and sheets all had to survive repeated use, while still looking clean enough to suggest care, discipline, and pride. That was not easy in homes without endless specialty products, or the habit of replacing things the moment they looked worn. Hydrogen peroxide became part of this world because it helped women fight the slow yellowing, grayness, and little fabric stains that made linens seem older than they were. It was one more practical tool in a larger system built on thrift and regular attention. These women were not trying to make every load of laundry look brand new. They were trying to keep everyday household fabric from crossing that line where clean still looked tired and tired started to feel neglected. Number 11. Brightening white socks and undershirts. White socks and undershirts were some of the hardest working items in the house, and because they were worn close to the body, they showed sweat, dullness, and repeated washing faster than many other garments. Peroxide was useful here because it gave women a way to brighten these basics and keep them looking cleaner for longer. That mattered more in that era than it might now. Many families owned fewer clothes, and the items they had were expected to hold up. A white undershirt that had gone gray or a sock that looked permanently dingy suggested age and wear even if it had been washed carefully. Housewives often fought that decline with simple additions to the wash routine. Not because they were chasing perfection, but because they knew appearance shaped how people judged cleanliness. The whiteness of fabric was part of the visual language of order. Number 12. Lifting yellowing from pillowcases and sheets. Bed linens carried another kind of challenge. Pillowcases and sheets absorbed skin oils, hair products, sweat, and all the ordinary traces of nightly life. Over time, even well-washed linens could yellow in ways that made a bed seem less fresh than it really was. Peroxide fit into the old laundry mindset because it could help women work against that slow fading of cleanliness. And the bed mattered. A neatly made bed with bright-looking linens helped a bedroom feel finished, orderly, and calm. In smaller homes, where rooms were used hard and privacy was limited, the appearance of the bed carried weight. It shaped how the whole room felt. Many women understood that the house did not need luxury to feel cared for. but it did need visible signs of maintenance. Fresh-looking pillowcases and sheets were part of that language. They told the family and any visitor that someone was still paying attention. Number 13. Spot treating collar marks and underarm stains. Few things made clothing look worn faster than marks around collars and underarms. These stains built slowly, but once they took hold, they made even decent garments seem tired. Peroxide gave housewives a practical way to respond early, especially on white or pale clothing that showed everything. This was another example of the older habit of stepping in before a problem had time to settle into the fabric. It was not only about cleanliness, it was about preserving the life of the garment. In the 1950s, women were often maintaining the family's appearance with limited wardrobes, limited budgets, and very little waste. They could not afford to be casual about the little signs that made clothing seem old. Do you remember seeing women handle small stains as soon as they appeared, almost as if they knew delay was what turned ordinary washing into a losing battle? That instinct saved a lot of fabric. Number 14. Freshening handkerchiefs and reusable cloths. Handkerchiefs and reusable cloths belonged to a household culture that expected everyday items to be used, cleaned, folded, and used again. Today, many of those objects have disappeared or been replaced by disposables, but in the 1950s they were part of the home's rhythm. Because they were reused so often, they needed help staying fresh and presentable. Peroxide became one of the ways women managed that cycle. A handkerchief was a small object, but it still reflected the condition of the home and the habits behind it. The same was true of reusable cleaning cloths, baby cloths, and little rags kept for household work. These were not glamorous pieces of domestic life, but they reveal something important. Earlier homes often looked more orderly because women paid attention to small, repeated details modern people now rush past or replace. Order was built in the tiny things, not only in the big weekly chores. Number 15. Helping keep baby clothes and delicate whites looking cleaner. Baby clothes and delicate white garments often received even more careful treatment. Infants went through clothing quickly, and pale fabrics showed stains almost at once. Delicate whites could easily lose their freshness if they were not handled with some care. Peroxide had a place here because it offered a gentle way to help keep these pieces looking cleaner and less worn. That mattered in families where clothes were handed down, reused, mended, and expected to stretch farther than they often do now. More than that, it speaks to the deeper feeling behind these laundry routines. Women were not only washing fabric, they were protecting dignity, thrift, and the appearance of care inside the home. The clean apron, the brighter pillowcase, the fresher handkerchief, the better-looking baby shirt all sent the same message. Someone was watching the details, and once those habits moved beyond the wash line and bedroom linen closet, Peroxide found its way into even more private corners of the house, where freshness and cleanliness mattered just as much. By the time hydrogen peroxide had proven itself in the sink, the kitchen, and the washtub, it had already become more than a cleaner. In many homes, it was one of those household standbys that sat quietly in the bathroom or medicine cabinet, ready for whatever small problem showed up next. That matters because 1950s housekeeping was not built only on deep cleaning days, it was built on steady little resets. A woman noticed the cloudy toothbrush cup, the damp bathroom corner, the stale-smelling waste bin, the comb with residue on it, and she handled it before the room started to feel neglected. That is a very different rhythm from the one many people live with now. Today, clutter and grime often pile up until they demand a major project. In earlier homes, one plain bottle could be part of a dozen tiny corrections that kept the whole room from slipping. The bottle itself was simple. The habit behind it was what made the difference. Number 16. Freshening combs and grooming tools. Hairbrushes, combs, and grooming tools were used constantly, especially in a time when hair was often set, brushed, and pinned, and maintained with more routine than many women follow now. Those tools picked up oils, residue, loose hair, and the dull film that builds slowly with repeated use. Peroxide had a place here because it helped freshen small grooming items that lived close to the face and hands. In a 1950s home, a woman did not always need a special cleaner for these things. She needed something practical. She needed something that could help keep them from looking or feeling neglected. That mattered because appearance was tied to discipline. A clean comb or brush was part of being put together. It reflected the same quiet order that showed up in the vanity drawer, the folded towel, and the neat collar on a blouse. Number 17. Cleaning small first aid or toiletry items. Peroxide also belonged to that older overlap between housekeeping and home care. The bathroom and medicine cabinet were not sharply divided worlds. Small first aid items, toiletry pieces, and practical tools were all kept together, and women often used what they had in careful, modest ways. Without making this into a grand medical claim, it is fair to say peroxide was one of those familiar bottles people reached for when they wanted to clean up little household items that needed attention. This mattered in an era when many homes kept fewer products on hand and expected each one to serve more than one purpose. It also shows how much older domestic life relied on judgment. Women were constantly deciding what needed washing, what needed freshening, what needed putting away, and what needed to be dealt with right now, before it turned into something harder to manage later. Number 18. Brightening stained nail brushes or manicure tools. Even the small objects used for hand care and grooming were part of this system. Nail brushes, manicure tools, and other little pieces could pick up residue and staining over time, especially in homes where hands were always busy with washing, cooking, sewing, gardening, and cleaning. Peroxide helped women freshen these overlooked items and keep them from looking worn before their time. That matters because grooming in the 1950s was often less about buying endless beauty products and more about maintaining simple tools well. A woman's hands were expected to work hard, but they were also expected to look reasonably neat. The same was true of the objects used to care for them. In that sense, peroxide was not just a cleaning product. It supported the small maintenance habits that helped ordinary women hold together a certain standard of presentation with very little fuss and very little waste. Number 19. Dealing with mildew-prone bathroom corners. Bathrooms also had their own damp trouble spots. Corners near the tub, the edge of a sink, the base of a shower curtain area, or any place where moisture sat too long could begin to look tired fast. In small shared bathrooms, this mattered because once mildew or staining showed up, the room lost its feeling of freshness almost immediately. Peroxide became useful in these problem areas because it helped women deal with the early signs of moisture-related grime before they spread. That is one of the clearest lessons in this whole story. The women who kept homes looking under control were often not cleaning harder than everyone else. They were intervening sooner. A damp bathroom corner did not stay ignored for weeks. It was noticed, handled, and folded back into the regular rhythm of the room. That kind of attention is easy to underestimate, but it changes everything about how a home feels. Number 20. Freshening waste bins and problem spots with lingering odor. Then there were the places nobody admired but everybody noticed the moment they were neglected. Bathroom waste bins, little problem corners, and odor-prone spots around the room could quietly undermine the feeling of cleanliness no matter how polished the sink or mirror looked. Peroxide had value here because it could help freshen those overlooked areas and cut through the stale feeling that settles into small, enclosed spaces. That made a difference in homes where a bathroom had to serve multiple people every day without feeling worn out by noon. Which of these little bathroom habits reminds you most of something an older relative used to do without making a big speech about it? Because by this point, the real story is no longer just peroxide itself. It is the older instinct to solve small messes while they are still small. And that instinct carried straight into the last and most important lesson of all. One simple bottle often stood in for half the products now crowding a modern cleaning cabinet. By this point, the most interesting part of the story is no longer hydrogen peroxide alone. It is the kind of home life that made one simple bottle so useful in the first place. In many 1950s houses, women were not managing clutter, stains, odors, and fabric wear, with a parade of specialized products lined up under every sink. They were working with a smaller group of basics and a steadier rhythm of attention. That meant peroxide did not stand out as some magic answer. It fit into a larger way of living that valued thrift, repeatable habits, and the idea that most household problems were easiest to solve while they were still small. Modern homes often wait until grime feels overwhelming, then throw money and time at it all at once. Older homes more often used plain things early and often. That is why one brown bottle could do so much. It was backed by a mindset that treated order as something you maintained, not something you restored after collapse. Number 21. Removing little mystery stains from counters or tile. One of the most useful things peroxide offered was help with those small, annoying marks that seemed to appear from nowhere. A pale stain on tile, a mark on a bathroom counter, a faint discoloration near a sink or backsplash could make a room feel older than it really was. In a 1950s home, women often paid attention to these minor blemishes because they understood how quickly they changed the mood of a room. Peroxide helped with the kind of little spot that did not justify a full cleaning campaign, but still needed to be handled. That is an important distinction. Good housekeeping was not always about dramatic labor. Very often it was about taking care of one irritating mark before it became part of the background. Modern people live around a lot of low-grade disorder. Earlier, women more often erased it while it was still small enough to ignore, and that is exactly why their homes so often felt calmer. Number 22. Freshening reusable cleaning cloths between washes. Peroxide also made sense in the endless cycle of reusable cleaning cloths. A modern household may rely heavily on disposable wipes and paper products, but many 1950s homes expected cloths to be rinsed, reused, washed, dried, and brought back into service again and again. That only worked if women had ways to keep those cloths from feeling stale, sour, or permanently dingy between bigger wash days. Peroxide helped support that cycle. This was not glamorous work, but it says a lot about how older homes functioned. They were often built on maintenance rather than replacement. Instead of constantly buying more, women got more life out of what they already had. That thrift was not always romantic. Sometimes it came from necessity. Still, it created a discipline modern households have largely lost. When even the cleaning cloths were kept reasonably fresh, the home itself had a better chance of staying ahead of mess instead of trailing behind it. Number 23. Helping old porcelain or enamel look brighter. Peroxide was also useful around the kinds of hard household surfaces that slowly lost their brightness through use. Porcelain fixtures, enamel pieces, pale bathroom items, and older utility surfaces could begin to look tired without being truly damaged. Women often used simple methods to restore a cleaner appearance because replacing those things was not a casual decision. A sink, basin, enamel tray, or white household item was expected to serve for years. That meant maintenance mattered. Peroxide fit into that habit of refreshing what was already there instead of reaching immediately for something new. That may be one of the biggest differences between then and now. We often live in a replacement mindset. They often lived in a preservation mindset. A slightly brighter surface, a cleaner-looking tray, or a fresher fixture may seem minor, but enough minor improvements added up to a home that looked more cared for than its actual age or budget might suggest. Number 24. Treating small messes before they became scrubbing jobs. In some ways, this was the real genius trick behind all the others. Peroxide was not only valued for what it cleaned, it was valued because it helped women respond early. A stain caught right away, a sour rag handled before the smell deepened, a mark wiped before it set, a damp corner dealt with before it darkened. All of that meant less labor later. This was the old housewife rhythm at its best. She did not always wait for official cleaning time. She folded little corrections into the day itself. That made chores feel smaller because many of them never got the chance to become full-scale jobs. When people say earlier women seem to keep homes under control with fewer products, this is often what they mean. They were using time differently. They were interrupting decline. And once you see that clearly, hydrogen peroxide stops looking like the star of the story and starts looking like one useful partner in a much bigger domestic system. Number 25. Keeping one low-cost standby for dozens of everyday needs. That brings us to the last trick, and it is really the biggest one of all. Keeping one low-cost standby that could handle dozens of ordinary problems across the house. That little brown bottle mattered because it represented something modern cleaning culture has largely buried under packaging and marketing. A home does not always need more products. Often it needs better habits, earlier attention, and more trust in simple tools that can serve more than one purpose. That does not mean the 1950s were perfect, and it certainly does not mean women then had easy lives. For many of them, the same routines that created order also created pressure. But some of their methods worked because they were steady, practical, and built around using what was already there. So when you picture that bottle of hydrogen peroxide under the sink, sitting beside folded rags and a bar of soap, you are really looking at something larger than a cleaner. You are looking at a whole way of running a home before every problem needed its own purchase. If this brought back a memory of the women who made simple things work, subscribe before you go. There is a lot more old wisdom worth keeping, one quiet household habit at a time.